Today is the feast of St. Gerard Majella, but the Gospel story is about St. Mary of Magdalene. So I spent some time wondering how to connect these two saints, asking myself, what, if anything, do they have in common? I was here at the church one day during the Novena, and I looked up at the painting behind the high altar. I thought it was a mosaic at first, but it's a painting on canvas. And I noticed how both Gerard Majella and Mary of Magdala appeared in this painting. So Gerard is there because he was obviously a Redemptorist. Mary of Magdala is there because she is one of the patron saints of preachers. And when St. Alphonsus founded our congregation way back in 1732, he chose Mary of Magdala to be one of the patron saints of the congregation because preaching was going to be an important Redemptorist ministry. So as I looked at the picture and thought about the two saints, I realized that they have more in common than might appear at first. But the first thing I'd like to suggest is that they were both outsiders. Mary of Magdala was a woman in a man's world. It wasn't easy being a woman, being a Jewish woman in first century Palestinian society. It was very much a male-dominated society. The roles, the responsibilities of women were very restricted. Gerard Majella was a poor man in a rich man's world, and that brought its own limitations and restrictions with it. And after he became a Redemptorist, he was a brother in a priest's world, and that brought its own particular difficulties as well. But Mary of Magdala and Gerard Majella were enabled by their faith in Jesus and by their relationship with Jesus, to break out of the boundaries that society was imposing on them. Because neither of them, once they came to know Jesus and his love, were willing to conform. So they created space for themselves and did things that were considered to be quite controversial and unconventional at the time. They were outsiders. And they were outsiders who followed Jesus in unusual circumstances. Mary of Magdala was one of the first followers of Jesus. She belonged to a group of women who left their homes, and in some cases their husbands, and took to the roads as followers of Jesus. But this was quite controversial, quite unconventional at the time, because a woman's place was in the home, and definitely, if you were a married woman, you weren't meant to up and leave your husband and follow an itinerant preacher. But Mary and these other women seem to have been women of some means, because we know from the Gospels that Mary and these other women supported Jesus. They supported him. They funded the mission and the ministry. They funded the first community as they wandered from place to place. So a rather unusual role for women at the time. Gerard Majella ran away from home to become a Redemptorist. His family weren't very keen on the idea. And when he arrived, the Redemptorists weren't very enthusiastic about having him either. Because they looked at him, as it were, with only human eyes, and what they saw wasn't very impressive. But you had to look at Gerard with God's eyes to see the promise and the potential and the possibility that was in him. So two outsiders from very different worlds, from very different times, but outsiders nevertheless who followed Jesus in unusual circumstances. Mary of Magdala and Gerard Majella both lost their good names. I'm sure we all value our names and our characters and our reputations, and one of the worst things that you can do to another person is take their good name away from them or damage their character. Gerard Majella was falsely accused of sexual misconduct. He refused to defend himself because he modelled himself on Jesus, and he said when Jesus was falsely accused, he didn't speak a word in his own defence. St. Alphonsus, who was our founder, believed the allegations and treated Gerard Majella very harshly. Alphonsus comes very badly out of the story, something very unattractive, very unappealing in the way he dealt with Gerard. But it reminds us that saints aren't perfect and that they have a darker side to their stories as well. Gerard Majella's reputation was eventually restored to him. Mary of Magdala lost her reputation, lost her good name after her death. Generations